I was talking with a grocery store worker in Southwest Ohio who told me, you know, they call me essential, but really I feel expendable. That grocery store worker, thousands of others are on the front lines of this pandemic. They risk their lives so that Americans can keep food on their tables and get their packages delivered. They're changing linens in hospitals. They drive buses. They stock shelves in supermarkets and drugstores. Then workers go home at night. They worry they're going to bring to their home the virus and infect their family. Always the anxiety they live with. We know that hundreds of thousands of workers have been exposed to the virus on this job. Thousands have died. We don't know exactly how many, Mr. President, because the president hasn't directed his government to make it a priority to keep track of these numbers. Think of that. We know UFCW, the United Food and Commercial Workers, reports that more than 16,000 grocery store workers have been exposed to work. More than 100 have died. 16,000 exposed to work, more than 100 have died. The National Nurses United has recorded at least 1,700 deaths. 58% of those health workers who died were people of color. 1,700 died, 58% of people of color. In meatpacking plants, we know the toll has been horrific. As of this summer, 16,000 workers in meatpacking plants, including in the Dakotas, the vast majority of them, black and brown workers, more than 230 had died. And we can only expect those numbers to be higher. And what is the president's response? In the White House, they're putting up holiday displays with a lit up ceramic post office and ornaments in the shape of garbage trucks and nursing hats. That's right, workers are dying around the country. Instead of doing anything at all to protect them, the President of the United States is decking the halls with ornaments. Workers don't need Christmas ornaments, they need fair pay, they need protections on their job. President Trump hasn't lifted a finger to protect frontline workers. Let me explain. I make a charge like that, I back it up. He spent 4 years in office putting corporate lawyers in charge of the Department of Labor. The Secretary of Labor made millions of dollars practicing law by representing corporations against workers, sometimes union workers, sometimes unorganized workers. The Department of Labor makes it easier for corporations to skirt labor rules, safety rules. The point of the Department of Labor, the point of the Occupational Safety and Health Administration is to protect workers. Yet this Secretary of Labor, this Department of Labor, including from IBEW workers to steel workers to meatpacking workers, he refused to issue workplace safety requirements throughout the pandemic. He failed to get workers the protective equipment and medical supplies they need to protect themselves. He forced people back to work in meatpacking plants around the country. And in South Dakota, we know, in a meatpacking plant owned by the Chinese Communist Party, 1,300 workers got sick at just one plant. 4 of them have died that we know of. The Trump administration fined this multi-billion-dollar meatpacking, Chinese Communist Party-owned meatpacking plant, fined them $10 a worker. 1,300 workers got sick. OSHA, the government, the president, fined them $10 a worker. But don't worry, he and his wealthy contributors who come for White House tours without masks or social distancing will get to look at some sparkly ornaments. President Trump could crack down on corporations like Smithfield. He could mobilize American manufacturers to get every American worker the masks and the protective equipment they need. He could issue an OSHA temporary standard, as we've asked him repeatedly, that would provide clear enforceable requirements for keeping workers safe. He could stand up for workers, but he won't. That's fundamentally why he lost. 80 million Americans decisively rejected this president, and his total lack of empathy is complete failure. There are some senators in this body whose mothers or fathers carried union cards and knew that was their ticket to the middle class and understood that their mothers and fathers were protected by OSHA, protected by a Department of Labor that cared about the safety of those workers in the workplace. But all that the president did do to ignore workers and didn't do to protect workers, it's none of that stopping him from trying to do more damage on the way out the door. The Trump USDA, Department of Agriculture, is trying to race through a new rule, trying to push through in the last weeks, a new rule that actually speeds up chicken factory processing lines. That's right, not slow them down, in the face of record infections at meat plants, but speed up the line. We know it's the oldest trick in the book. You make more money if you speed up the line. You speed up the line and workers are more likely to get hurt. You speed up the line during a pandemic and more workers are likely to get sick. They tried to pass the rule earlier. It was held up over concerns workers would get hurt and salmonella would spread. That's not even counting COVID. But to President Trump and his allies, more workplace injuries, more grandparents hospitalized by salmonella or small price to pay, if it means more profits for meatpacking companies. Trump and his corporate lawyer, Secretary of Labor, are pushing through a new policy to ensure that companies can continue to exploit workers by classifying them as independent contracts. Go back to the childhood of a number of members of the Senate who had parents that worked in factories, parents that worked in construction jobs, parents that carried a union card. You know what that would mean to those workers and the threat that they could get sick. And you think about now, corporations love this new business model. It's a way to classify people as independent workers. It's a way to pay people less for the same work, skirt labor laws, wash their hands of responsibilities for the workers who make their business successful. These workers aren't working for a big insurance company that really does have a public image they're trying to protect. These workers aren't working for a hospital or a big bank that cares about its public image. These workers are working for an entity hired by these big banks or by these insurance companies to prepare the food or to provide the security or to do the custodial work, a company you've never heard of that has no public image because this company is all about being hired by large corporations. They then can pay them lower wages. They can then protect them less on the job. They can then not provide benefits. That's what happens with contract workers, those independent contractors. We know they love this business model. They can pay workers less. They can skirt labor laws. President Trump wants to make that easier, partly because he probably does that in his business, and he has a whole lot of corporate friends, big contributors to the Trump campaign, who make more money by doing that. Fundamentally, President Trump, Senator McConnell, and their corporate allies, Mr. President, they just don't understand the dignity of work. They think workers are always a cost to be minimized instead of the engine behind all our country's success. Think back again for those members of the Senate whose parents carried union cards, who cared about all this, who had a chance at a job like this, who had a chance for opportunity, because those workers carried a union card and were treated decently on the job. Because those workers carried a union card, their bosses couldn't think of them only as a cost to be minimized. They did think of them as the engine behind their country's success. Well, the American people rejected that thinking. 80+ million people voted for a new president. They voted against a president who treated workers as expendable. They voted for the candidate who put workers at the center of his campaign. Joe Biden ran the most pro-worker campaign in a generation, and in January, we get to work to deliver results. The new president, right now, the new president from January 20th can immediately issue an OSHA emergency temporary standard forcing corporations to take important, critical, decisive steps to protect their workers from contracting or spreading the virus in their workplaces. What's more important than protecting workers, especially essential workers that deliver our food, that prepare food, that do custodial work, that do security work, that are helping people in our country live every day. With cases rising, hospitals filling up all over the country, the end of January isn't soon enough. Workers put themselves at risk in nursing homes and hospitals. They deliver packages of holiday gifts. They stock supermarket shelves with supplies for holiday meals. Some of the workers are going to get sick. Some of them are going to die. They're going to die because they're essential workers, but we don't treat them like essential workers. We could do something about it now. We could pass a real plan that invests in protective equipment for them. We could pass a real plan that did testing and contact tracing. We could get money to small businesses like Liz Valenti's business in Dayton, Ohio, so they can protect their workers, her 2 restaurants in Dayton. But what is Leader McConnell doing? Ramming through more Trump nominees like Mr. Hoffman and Mr. Waller, who keep stacking the deck in favor of their Wall Street friends, trying to hold onto their power even after Americans said, no, we want something different, 80 million of us. Mitch McConnell needs to stop letting Donald Trump sabotage our economic recovery on his way out the door and get to work for the people we serve. It's time to remember what makes this country great. If you love this country, you'll fight for people who make it work, our workers who organized in union halls and church basements and fought for workers' rights and women's rights and civil rights. In closing, Mr. President, I know that Senator Lee wants to speak. I've worn, for my time in the Senate and before that, I've wore this pin on my lapel. It's a depiction of a canary in a bird cage. You may remember the old labor story of the coal miner that took the canary down in the mines. If the canary died from suffocation or lack of oxygen or some contaminant in the air, the mine worker got out of the mines. He had no union in those days to protect himself. And he had no government that cared enough, that was strong enough to protect him, and he had no government that cared enough to protect him. And he was essentially on his own. And this pen was given to me at a Workers' Memorial Day rally by a steel worker who told me about this pen and what it stood for. He knows that the labor movement changed this country for the better. It created the greatest economy and strongest middle class on earth. It said the opposite. What Mitch McConnell says to workers all over the country is, sorry, you're on your own. What this canary pen represents is we're all in this together. It means we fight for the dignity of work. It means if you love your country, you fight for the people who make it work. We can do that again. We can protect workers from this virus. We can build a better system centered on the dignity of work. I yield the floor.